Now, from WNYT, this is Forum 13.
There's so many well-meaning groups in the capital region who are working for good causes, but it can be tricky, especially keeping the money in the right place, not getting in trouble. We are joined by Tim Reynolds and Kevin O'Leary, both with Marvin and Company. They are both CPAs. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this morning.
Well, thanks for having us.
Tim, from time to time in the news, we hear of critical audits, audits critical of nonprofits, sometimes leading to civil, even criminal charges. Are some of these nonprofits well-meaning, but they're just doing the wrong things? They're confused about how to get it done in the right way?
Yeah, well, the vast majority of the nonprofits out there, they're out there doing a good job, doing the best they can for the public good. Sometimes it's just mismanagement, lack of knowledge about what they're supposed to do, and unfortunately, sometimes there are cases out there where somebody gets control of a not-for-profit and it just takes advantage and mismanages it intentionally for the wrong reason.
Right, right. But we're addressing the groups that are out there for a good cause. Something comes up that affects their lives. Maybe it's a family they can help. Maybe it's a cause. Sometimes we have certainly seen people who are just minding their own business, but they're affected, say, by an illness or something, and they are motivated to do something right. So suddenly they're thrust into a position that they never thought they'd be in, didn't get a lot of practice at it. You're allowed to cover certain expenses, for example, right? But there are other expenses you can't.
Right. And I think it's key that that you let the management of the organization run the day-to-day operations, and from a board of governors or a board of trustees, they stay out of that. But it's very key for everybody to understand what the mission of the organization is and really stick to that as always being kind of the truth to what goes into what you do. And if you think that there's an expense involved that you're incurring that you think might be on the kind of the edge of not being towards the mission, it might be something that you want to bring back to the board and say, hey, listen, this is something we're thinking of expanding, or we're thinking about taking on this new endeavor. Is this something we can do? And use maybe the group setting to figure out if that's something you should take into. But there's definitely expenses that nonprofits should shy away from. Stuff that has to do with political issues, things like that. You should always check with your professionals to see if it kind of goes along with what the not-for-profit's supposed to be doing.
All right, so Kevin, at what point do you, say a neighbor, we'll make up a hypothetical, but we've heard it occurring. The neighbor, the child of a neighbor comes down with a deadly disease. And so neighbors decide they want to get together and raise money to help them cover the costs that aren't insured. Do you form a board right away, or does it not have to be that sophisticated? At what point do you say, okay, now we need a board, now we really got to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's, or we're going to get in trouble here?
Well, I think you could even take it a step back and say there's a lot of great organizations that might already be out there that could set up something within their organization, and they have already laid out the foundation. They've already done all the homework, that you can maybe bring that opportunity to them and saying, hey, listen, we have this opportunity where we're trying to take care of a child who has a certain illness, and we're trying to raise funds that maybe we could use that for that child this year, but going forward we could use it for the same type of program and use this as the first year. If you wanted to start up your own organization, yeah, you're going to want to get people involved that have been involved with organizations like this before. You're going to want to get professionals involved, accountants, lawyers, maybe actuaries, maybe retired executive directors from other organizations, people who have experience in setting these up, because there are very detailed reports that need to go into the Attorney General's office to get exempt status, so you can collect donations and things and such, and show that they're tax exempt for the people who are giving the money. There's a lot that goes into them. I just wouldn't go out and say, hey, let's get 5 friends together and start raising money, because there really is a lot of catch-alls in this equation.
All right, even though that's probably the first inclination, right? But okay, so a good, see if somebody else maybe can already do this for you, a group that already exists, and they might be able to help you, because it gets pretty darn complicated. All right, and then have board members specifically who have expertise in financial matters, fiscal management.
Well, one of the things you're going to want to consider is, what the mission is, and you're going to want a couple people on the board that have experience with that mission, but aren't directly involved in the management of the organization. But every board is also going to want some general expertise in the area of finance and accounting. It's always good to have a lawyer on your board. Another area, excuse me, is typically somebody involved in insurance, maybe a banker, but you really want to have a broad array of expertise so that the issues that end up coming to the board and are overseen by the board, there's enough in-depth understanding to be able to really make an educated decision.
Yeah, and then you still have to walk the line. I read recently about a church group that is in trouble because they allowed a political figure to park his fleet of cars in their parking lot. That's a no-no?
Well, anytime you start to mix political activities with not-for-profits, you get into some really troublesome ground. There's a lot of restrictions related to that. 501c3 organizations specifically are not supposed to engage in political activity.
All right, so 501c3 is what?
That's the IRS designation for a nonprofit organization that's set up for educational or charitable purposes for the benefit of the public.
Is there more than one kind of nonprofit?
Yes. Yes. I believe there's 501c up to 19 or some, I can't remember how high it goes, but there's all different associations, trade groups. Some of these 501c3s can take donations and contributions that become tax deductible, where there's other 501cs that aren't allowed to do that. So they're not allowed to take contributions, or if they do take contributions, they're not deductible by the contributor. So there's a wide variety of 501cs out there. So
first thing you got to figure out is what kind of nonprofit you are. Mm-hmm. Then it sounds like the second thing, you better go find a lawyer and find a CPA. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
It's a good start.
Yes.
Very good start.
There are some groups who run a profit and a nonprofit side.
Well, you have your regular commercial activity, your privately held law firms, businesses, manufacturing, things of that such. And then you have your nonprofits or exempt organizations, whatever title you want to give them, who are, it's kind of a misnomer. They're called not-for-profits. We have a lot of nonprofits who run a very good profit and do a very good job of what they do, and have been around this area for many, many years. So it is kind of a misnomer, but there is, and they're also called tax exempts when they could actually be paying tax. Mm-hmm. So it's more or less the title, but it can be a little, it might not be exactly what it sounds like.
But the groups who think they fit this, mm-hmm. They have a profit arm, they find for whatever reason they have a profit arm and they decide to establish a nonprofit arm, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. Do they have to watch where they, who uses the stapler or who uses the Scotch tape dispenser that was bought with non-for-profit money? Don't use it for a profit-making cause?
Well, you have to make sure those two activities are kept separate, and that cost relative to one organization is different from those of another organization. Now, if all the activities, as Kevin had said, if you're making a profit within one nonprofit organization, as long as you're following your defined mission and you're not engaging in political activities or any other types of restricted transactions, you can share everything within that same organization. The area that might come into play is there's a number of not-for-profits out there that sometimes for legal liability reasons or other reasons, they actually set up a whole separate corporation that's actually a for-profit mm-hmm. C corporation. And in those cases, you have to be careful that the costs that relate to each organization are kept separate and distinct.
Yeah. How tight are the not-for-profit rules then that these nonprofits get to work by? I mean, can you and your board members go out to dinner? Can you take a trip to Wisconsin because you think there's something that would benefit the group?
Well, they have to be reasonable expenses. There have been cases where, some board they'll take a trip to Europe to have their annual board meeting. Mm-hmm. Well, if the Attorney General's office has come in and done audits and seen those kind of things, they say, you're really abusing that privilege that we've given you as a tax-exempt organization in doing those kind of things. So you generally want to keep the expenses reasonable and not do anything that's too extravagant like that.
And there's in the tax return, the tax return that nonprofits are required to file. It's called a 990. There are schedules, and there are all different types of schedules in there. And there's one in there that asks what kind of benefits board members get. Are they allowed to travel first class? Are they allowed to do this? Are they allowed to do that? And a lot of that is because of people taking advantage of not only nonprofits but for-profits in the last decade. You know, this all cascades down from WorldCons, Enrons, those types of entities. It's not just what happened at nonprofits and things and such. And so now they're starting to take the for-profit world and bring it into the nonprofit world and ask a bunch of questions just to see if they should be digging deeper into things.
Yeah.
And it's very much more of it. In 2008, the return changed drastically, and there's many more questions out there now that were never asked before about these types of expenses, including politicals. So it's much more in the forefront of the IRS's mind and other regulatory agencies, for sure.
And depending on how you answer those questions, you could lose your nonprofit status.
Well, you might not lose your nonprofit status right off the bat, but they're now in their second year. Like I said, they started in 08, and I think what you're going to start to see is if you start answering a collection of questions in the way that you shouldn't be answering them, you might get a letter that says, or you might get an interview that says, we just like to come in and see what's going on. Yeah. Maybe not a full-blown audit, but you might get a knock on the door to say, hey, we'd like to have a conversation about it. Yeah. But there's definitely correlating questions throughout the whole tax return that if you maybe put no in too many spots, and you have maybe some loans to officers, or you maybe have some other things that are kind of, I don't want to say on the shady side of things, but they kind of walk the line of not being right for your entity or your organization, then you might get an audit, yeah.
What's a 921?
Oh, 921, on September 21st.
Okay.
On September 21st, our firm, Marvin & Company, we're doing an event to talk about basically what it means to be on a board. We're trying to educate the public a little bit about what it means to be a board member with financial responsibilities, fiscal duties, things and such. Basically talk about the same things that we're talking about here today. And really to just get into, if you're someone who's looking to join a board, or if you're someone who's been on a board for a while, this is a great opportunity to just come in and ask questions and hear about what an audit means, what a financial statement audit means. There's a big difference between an IRS audit and an audit that we do. And, you know, so we're just trying to maybe take a step back, do a short 1.5-hour program with a half-hour Q&A, and just let anybody talk about whatever they want and just kind of walk through what we do on a general basis.
So if you're thinking of setting up a nonprofit, or even if you already have one established, sounds like a great classroom to either learn what you should be doing or how to review, or reviewing what it is you're doing and make sure you're doing it right.
And we have a large...
Where's that going to be?
At the Desmond, September 21st from 4 to 6. And we have and it's free, which we wanted to do because, you know,
nonprofits
they love to hear that. And, you know, it's a great opportunity for us to get in front of a lot of people, but we have a large nonprofit client base at our firm, and we hear these questions at all these board meetings we go to. So we thought, hey, there's a lot of nonprofits out there that don't have the luxury of having accounting firms, lawyers at their disposal, so why not bring it to them? And I think it's a great opportunity for people to come and hear what we have to say.
All right, do you have a website?
We do. It's www.marvincpa.com. All the information's out there. There's also other educational pieces out there. We do some webinars once a month, usually on all different types of topics that affect nonprofits. So they're out there as well. And if you have any questions, you know, feel free to use the website to get in touch with either Tim or myself.
And I believe we'll set up a link on our website at WNYT.com. and try to make it as easy as possible to find their way to you and your website. Great. Federal and state governments are hurting right now. Sometimes, state budget, we see this every year, and a lot of nonprofits are left hanging every year because they don't get their money when it was promised. They may eventually get it, but they've got to figure out a way to pay their bills, maybe for months. Does this cause real problems for them, especially in the accounting field and staying legal? Oh,
it's been a significant issue for nonprofits. You know, the one thing that they're seeing is not just a delay in payments, but, you know, with the recent developments with the state, there's been a lot of funding cuts for agencies and organizations that get some of their funding from the state governments. The other thing that you're seeing is with the weakness in the economy, the ability for people to contribute, provide donations, both at the individual level and the corporate level has started to fall off as well. So, you know, as they're seeing funding cuts from the state side, it's becoming increasingly difficult to make those up on the private side. So a lot of them are forced to, you know, really cut costs and unfortunately at times cut services.
Yeah. Sometimes caught after, I mean, they've already implemented plans based on a promise made by the state government, only to learn after the fact, well, either they're not going to, you know, get it on time, or as you say, maybe they're not going to get it at all. It must catch some of them in a bind.
It does. You know, I have you know, one example I've seen is where there was some capital funding to a not-for-profit organization I work on about a year and a half ago or so. And when the state budget, they went out, purchased a building that was going to be remodeled, and then got word that, you know what, we're not going to be able to fund the project. And at the same time, the housing market is dropping, and they ended up having to take quite a loss when they sold that building, when they couldn't come up with the funding to refurbish it.
All right, tell us again about your seminar, when it is, where it is.
September 21st, Desmond Hotel, 4 to 6. There'll be some free appetizers and stuff. So that's an enticing way to get some people in the door afterwards. And Tim will be one of the presenters, along with one of the other partners in the firm, who handles a lot of not-for-profits and the technical side of things. And we're expecting to have about 75 people there. So.
Okay. And again, your website?
MarvinCPA.com.
All right, and there's still time to sign up for this seminar.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Good. Yep. All right. Tim Reynolds, Kevin O'Leary, thank you very much with Marvin and Company. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us.
All right. Appreciate you joining us today on Forum 13. We'll be right back.